Welcome back to another episode of the VRF Tech Talk podcast. Donald Felice here again, joined by Roman. Today, a little bit fun topic of startup. Where do we go? How do we do startup on machines, and what information is useful for us at startup? Even though you're just a startup guy and you're responsible for evacuation, charging, and running tests, there's a lot more that goes into it prior to that, just to make sure that you are successful at your startup. Roman, do you have any insights on that before we jump into it all?
Yeah, turn the power on and hit that test operation button, buddy. Yeah, it's full send. So startup's one of those weird ones. If you've never done it before, highly recommend it. It will ruin your day most likely, but that's okay because VRF is painful. But it's a good pain, right? We're learning, we're growing. It's not going anywhere. So when Donald mentions startup, I've done a handful. Donald has done a handful, and we know a lot of people who've done a handful. And there are ones that have gone so beautifully well, and there are ones that have just gone like dog crap. Hell in a handbasket 5 days in, and you still can't get the dang thing running. And so, what we're going to talk about today is how to be successful in startup. And you'll be surprised to find that some of these things are things that you're going to do before you even get to the job site. Things that have to be done before you even get in front of the equipment with power ready to go. That before you get that email from the general contractor saying that it's ready for startup, even though you've already been there 6 times and they still don't have power. Because that's the realistic world we live in. These are the tips that we're going to give you today and talk about surrounding how to be successful at startup. And that's across the board. That's reps, that's contractors, customers, clients, whoever you are, whatever your involvement is with VRF in the industry. This one is for you. This one's for you to get your equipment running, right? Congratulations, you're the owner of a VRF piece of equipment. Now let's get the thing running.
Right. So as you mentioned, something to do before you even get to the job site. This really applies for the service groups and the larger installers that have, different teams that are going to do your pipe fitting and then your reefer work and then your startup and then controls, right? But all of this really applies to everything. Now, there's one group in my area that has kind of taken their startup guys and made them be the kind of overall foremans, I guess you could say, of the job, right? They're going to the job site as the piping is happening, as the control wiring is happening, as everything is happening, just so that their lives are easier, 6 months down the road, because now they don't have to go back and say, hey, you didn't follow this rule and you have this pipe that's in the wrong place, or you didn't run this wire. They're kind of policing the jobs on themselves so that they don't have a problem 6 months to a year down the road. And it all comes down to planning and coordination between your different groups. Now, your smaller groups that, the pipe fitter and the guy that's running the pipe and the wiring is the guy that's going to be charging the system and starting up in the end. Like, there's no excuse for you to be ultimately responsible for the entire project at that point, right? You're there. You have to own it. And all I can really say is I'm just going to give you some tips along the way to make that easier for yourself.
Yeah. Because again, you could do everything right, all up to the point where you turn the machine on and realize that everyone who did the work before you to get you to where you are didn't do anything right. And you still have to find a way around it to correct it, to fix it, to get it running. Because the answer isn't just, well, we can't get it running. They bought a new piece of equipment, and now it's your job to get this thing running.
Right.
So
we're going to dive into the gist of it. To me, the most important thing is to know what was installed. If you didn't directly install it, then you need to know what you're going to start up. It doesn't help anybody if you walk into a job site blind and you say, I'm here for startup, and you don't know if there's one air handler, if there's 15 air handlers, if there's 20 systems. You need to know what is installed. So in the Daikin world, we have this thing called a Web Express, where it's kind of equatable to the Bible of what's going on in the job, or the entire roadmap of the job. You're going to have your system layout, your characteristics, the fan coil types, the tonnages of the fan coils, the tonnage of the outdoor unit, your piping diagrams, your wiring diagrams. All of that is in this one document. So not even looking at this document before you get out to the job site to do startup, you're setting yourself back, weeks of work potentially, because you didn't have this with you, or you didn't look at it, or you didn't care to open it. If you don't have it, you got to ask for it. And every manufacturer has something similar, right? Like Daikin has the Web Express, Mitsubishi has the Diamond Builder, and everybody has like some
Yep.
form of a lat, right? Everybody knows what that is.
Yeah.
Look at it, right? Set yourself up for success by knowing exactly what you're going to do when you want to go do it.
Yeah.
So that when it comes to startup, you're not chasing down an electrician to find out why they didn't run this wire, or why they didn't bring this pipe to this unit correctly, or it doesn't match the plans, right? Set yourself up for success by looking at that document weeks before you're ready for startup.
Yeah, because again, if you're showing up and just hoping that an error code is going to somehow magically fix your problems, and you're going to troubleshoot everything based upon what the unit throws as an error when you put it in test operation, you're going to be sadly mistaken. It doesn't work like that. And so, that document that Donald is explaining and talking about is allowing you to understand exactly how many indoor units you have connected. What is your connection ratio? What is your elevation change between your outdoor unit and your indoor unit? Because there are field settings that matter that have to be set on this equipment to get started on the right foot. I've done so many videos on my YouTube channel, and we've talked about it here about how many premature failures are attributed to poor installation. And it's not just you passing it off onto the guy who brazed the pipe. It's being passed off to you who is starting the equipment. It is your job to make sure that it is starting on the right foot. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go back and pipe wipe everything that's inside the building because of the guy who didn't braze without nitrogen. I'm saying that if there are field settings that have to be set, if there are things that have to be tweaked or adjusted, your group addresses, your AirNet addresses, all the things that you're supposed to go through and check the boxes on when you do startup, that has to be done. And that has to be done by you. And so you have to be thorough in that understanding of, one, you need the Bible that is the VRV Express report or the web layout, whatever program that you're using with your VRF equipment. Because remember, VRF is customized. It's designed around that specific project in that specific way. And so you need that exact layout. And then from there, you start working it backwards, right? How many indoor units do I have? Again, what field settings do I need to set? When I go to the outdoor unit and they turn the power on, right, you're going to get those really easy error codes, right? And I call them easy error codes because, phase reversal, right? Phase loss, right? I turn the power on the equipment and immediately I get an error code because we're missing a leg of high voltage, or the rotation is the incorrect way. And so, those are the easy ones that pop up, right? Those U1s, those U101, U104, stuff like that. So those are easy to fix. But when we start to turn the unit on and it goes to look for indoor units and it starts counting all these indoor units, if you don't know what that number is supposed to be, and you go to put it in a test operation and it's only running 6 out of the 32 fan coils that are supposed to be connected, how well do you think that's going to go, right? You could sit there for 2.5 hours with the equipment running and realize that it's going to pop an error code because someone turned a fan coil back on, right? You have to understand these numbers and where to find them to then start it off on the right foot of knowing what are my indoor unit counts, right?
Right. So to that point, right, if you started up a system and you had 5 fan coils, then all of a sudden you found out there were supposed to be 10, right? You're going to see potentially some error codes, but sometimes you might not. And that might not can turn into a really big problem for you down the road. So if you went through and did startup and came to find out that you had the wrong amount of fan coils on your system, you're potentially looking at some failures right off the bat, right? And we don't want that. We don't want failures. So I'm going to bring open, or I'm going to share my screen to show you kind of what a Web Express or the final report looks like on a system. And then I'm going to go back and show you kind of why that's really important to know what you're spitting out. So
yeah,
let me share this up.
Can I hammer some point home real quick? So when you're doing startup, you're not just there for one piece of equipment. Let's say this project has 8 systems. You're going to start up all 8 systems, and you're a very efficient guy or gal, right? I don't judge here. And you're going to go through and you're going to turn all this equipment on, and you're probably going to go through a process of starting these systems in test at the same time. This one in test, that one in test, this one in test, that one in test. Well, what's going to happen when this unit that's running in test operation and the unit next to it's running in test operation, but they're cross-wired, right? All the indoor units for one system is actually wired to the other system and vice versa. And so it's sending refrigerant to fan coils that aren't even connected to it. But guess what? It doesn't see it because they're both running test operation at the same time. They're both in cooling mode. They're both looking for refrigerant change at the indoor units. And I've seen this happen on 3 or 4 hotels throughout the years where they do test operation for all the units at the same time. And again, these units are on the roof. It's a 7-story building. The wire got crossed on the F1, F2 ends going up the shaft to the outdoor units. And they had no idea why all this crazy stuff was going on a year later when it started doing parallel operation, and just things weren't cooling and heating correctly because it was sending refrigerant to what it thought was indoor units that weren't even connected to that system.
Right. And I'll touch on something like that kind of later on when we get into more of the running startup. But yeah, definitely. I've seen it, probably 50 times in the last 10 years where we have identical systems right next to each other with 2 or 3 fan coils on them. And down the riser, they switch the pipe, right? So it's tripping a low pressure code when it's running test operation. What's going on? And then you come to find out, it's like, why is this machine over here making noise? I'm running this machine right here. And then, right.
This line's really hot over here. It's not running.
This unit's not running, but for some reason, it's got refrigerant noise.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll share my screen here just to show what this kind of looks like. So the first page is kind of just details information, right? So this is going to be my training center here that we're recording in, and then the second page is going to be materials list, right?
All the things.
This is what was approved for that job site. So if you have something different than that on that machine, you got to pick up the phone and ask, hey, did something change? Did we get a different model? Can I get an update on this? Is there something different, right?
Yeah.
I know for sure that this is the unit that is installed, 10 feet to the left of me.
Yeah, and if you have that list, and then they go, yeah, here's all the parts we didn't need off that list when you go to start up the equipment.
Yeah. We didn't use these
extra
fittings. We had an extra one of these. Well, hold on a minute. Where did you not put one in? Oh, well, we put a T in here rather than that. Blah blah blah. Right. So
Daikin said it was okay on VRV2, so we just thought it was good to go on all the other series.
Right. Now, these are Roman touched on this, but these are designed systems, right? This isn't just slap it together and it works. These are designed systems. So if you have an extra ref net, what would happen?
So we could keep going down here for the line sizes, but then the layout, it talks about all the basic stuff, the weights and the size of the unit and what the capacity is and all that good stuff like that. How many units you have and what systems. But then you get a little bit deeper in the weeds, and it's going to show you the exact piping layout. And in that piping layout, those are not suggestions. Those are the Bible. And so if you're changing the distances that are listed on that express report, remember the express report is a guess, right? The engineer said, I laid it out. I know how to use, right? I know how to use one of these, right? This engineering ruler here. And I measured it out, right? Yeah, there you go. And this is how much piping the drawings show. But then if you actually walk it in the building, you'll find that everything's off by 10 feet. Yeah. And so what does that change? Well, that changes the total refrigerant charge. That might even change the line set size. That might change the piping diameter of the size. And so if you're there at startup and things aren't looking the way they should, especially on service checker data after turning the system on, you start to ask the questions, right? Did anybody know that this roughnet model actually is supposed to go at the first roughnet, not the last roughnet, right? When you had to buy reducers to upsize the roughnet to fit the pipe that you had, that should have been the red flag that roughnet size for 1.125" doesn't go on the 5/8 pipe at the last fan coil. It goes on the first connection where it is 1.125" coming from the outdoor unit. And these are common mistakes that happen. You think that they don't happen, right? You think that we're just making stuff up here, but we have seen some crazy stuff in the field. And that comes back to, well, no one told me where these were supposed to go. And it's like, yeah, it's in this report.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think this is a really good page that often gets overlooked. It might just be words to some people, but read the heading there is piping limitations. So
limitations.
Some of the questions that come up are like, how far can I come off of a branch lifter? Well, it's right here in the document. If you read it, then you know that you can't go more than 131 feet.
Yep.
Right? How far can I be from the first branch to the indoor unit? Well, you can go 295 feet. That means from the length of the first branch to the indoor unit. So that means if you have a ref net here, you can go 295 feet total to the furthest fan coil on that branch, right? So some of this stuff is definitely, pipe fitter centric, but all of those rules are there. there for your
Donald,
disposal.
those rules are just suggestions. Come on, come on. No, they're just they're like, hey, if you could do us a favor and you could maybe keep it under these numbers, that'd be great, right? That's what this is for, right? And the answer is no.
No. This is one that comes up pretty often for me, is maximum height difference between indoor units. Is like, can we put a branch selector on the 10th floor and pipe down to a fan coil in the basement? It was like, well, are you going to be more than 98 feet? Yeah, no.
It's 250 feet.
Yeah, it's going to be like 275 feet down.
Yeah, no, it's not going to work.
Basement 7.
It's not going to work. And then they're going to say, well, we turned it on and it cooled great for 6 months. And it's like, well, yeah. And then all your oil got trapped at the bottom floor and it doesn't run anymore. And so this is the thing about the Express. The Express report takes into account all of the rules that are there in the manuals, installation, service, and any other engineering manuals that are there, and tell you if you are going to break something that the unit cannot perform at, right? Cannot perform at. These are limitations that say anything over any of these numbers, and it will not perform and will have a critical failure in a short period of time. And you may get lucky and get away for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but it will result in a failure because they know the limitations of the equipment they design. Right. And so they're not guidelines. They are hard rules that stop there.
Yeah, definitely is
the law. That's what it is.
And we're not coming to job sites to break your stones because you did 132 feet over 131. We're saying, like, if you're going to put that branch selector in the far east corner of a building and you're going all the way to the west side of that building and it's 300 feet away, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Right. There's reasons these rules exist. Now,
got to redesign
we're getting to that piping tree that Roman was talking about. This is the roadmap. This is how you're successful.
Yeah.
They come out with suggested pipe sizes based on what is in the prints or what a design sheet says or what the engineer says the piping length should be. But ultimately, you as the installer are responsible for verifying that, yes, branch selector 1 to fan coil 14 is actually 27 feet of pipe. Yep. Now, is it to the inch? No. But if you're 60 feet, that could make a difference. If you're 4 feet, that could make a difference.
Yeah.
But just verifying that these numbers coming from whoever is doing your reports is correct, or if you're providing that back to whoever is doing the design on that, that's what you need to do, right? Then you need to verify that. You need to do takeoff. You need to walk the job, right? Get your spray paint out, start spray painting the floors just to make sure that you know that this is the path that you're taking to get your pipe from point A to point B.
Yep.
Because at the end of the project, after somebody has run 150 feet of 1 3/8, 1 5/8 copper, and then you say, well, we're going to have to upsize on the main run there to 1 1/8 rather than that 3/4 that you ran, right? That's expensive.
Yeah, it is. It's very expensive. And so you get a lot of guys who are like, well, we just have to keep it the way it is and hope it runs great. And I'll tell you right now, those are the ones that, we're going to have to come back and repipe. And it's like, just, you got to do it the first time. And I get that's hard. And I get that's not easy. And I get it's painful. And yes, it requires a foreman that understands this on the job, doing the construction, overseeing the teams. It requires a superintendent who's going in and actually understanding the importance of this. It requires a service technician. It requires a service manager to understand also the time it takes to fully commission a system like this. You can't do it in an hour, but it also doesn't take 2 weeks to commission a system to get this stuff the way that it should be. And he said it again right there, 4 feet. We're off by 4 feet. Well, sure, you would say that's not a lot of piping, Roman, but 4 feet times 10 units, and they're all off by 4 feet. Well, that's 40 feet. Yeah, 40 feet is a lot of refrigerant that we're going to be missing from the system. And we talk about critical charge, and I've done some videos on this too. VRV3, super forgiving, right? She was built like a tank. I mean, it's amazing how much I love that series over our series that we have now. But then you get further into it, VRV4. 15 to 10% off on charge cause failures. VRVX, like 8% off on charge cause failures. And then a Mirion, we're still figuring that number out, but it's still looking like it's the same. The further we go, the bigger the systems get, the further the longer the line sets get for the way we push things in our current industry to make things better, faster, stronger, right? the more these charges are critical. They are, because it's these small, teeny tiny segments that we're missing, or that don't get updated, or that don't get corrected, or that don't get added to this stuff. You charge it because you think that it's correct from day one, when no one has come back and done a revised plan. If someone gives me a drawing from a job from day one, right, I'm there to start it up, and they give me the original as-built the sales engineers sold the job on, I throw it in the trash, because it's useless unless someone has gone through and done the as-builts and remeasured. You're telling me that on this report, every freaking inch on this piping is exact, like the sales engineer saw into the future, went and pre-measured that job, and then came back and then quoted it perfect. There's no freaking way. I have never seen it. If you know somebody, you have them reach out to me, because I have never seen that. And so there should be two reports. There should be the first one and the second one that you fill out from the as-builts that have been corrected. That's just how I feel about it. There's just no give or budge there.
Right. There shouldn't be, right? Every project should come with a set of turnover documents where it's your as-builts. And if you turn over something that you don't plan on doing the service work on for the next year or 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is, and you're not providing this, man, you're really hurting the people that are coming after you.
I've got a project right now. We just did a PM on beautiful building, beautiful installation. Oh man, cream of the crop. Every single freaking unit is undercharged by 20%, and the data shows it. And we're not talking 2 or 3 units. No, we're talking 23 systems that are now having failures 3 years later down the road, because again, the system was, again, at the time it was auto charged, right? And they thought that was better than the Web Express. And even then, the Web Express didn't account for the retrofit that happened on the building and all the other unknown factors. But every single one, it's undercharged, and the data shows that, right? That's the one thing you can't cheat. You can't cheat the physics that the system has to follow in our universe. And so when we look at operational data, we look at these systems and how they run, we can easily determine if it's under or overcharged based upon its performance when you match it up 100% connection ratio to 100% demand of the outdoor unit, right? 10 tons is 10 tons. You can't cheat it. You can't reshape it. You can't add capacity to it. It's going to perform exactly the way 10 tons should. We can benchmark a system and find out exactly how it performs based upon that, and determine if it's low on charge, or if it's overcharged, or if the charge is off by a slight amount. But it all comes back to startup, right? They missed it. They thought auto charge was the bee's knees, and they did every freaking system, and they said the unit knows better than I do. And now they're suffering because of it. So
I hate to say it, but sometimes it's just pure laziness where you don't keep track of your pipes, but it saves you in the long run. The reason why I say it saves you in the long run is I'm going to scroll back up to the top, right? We see that we have our footages in there. And the big question you get is, well, how much charge do I need? Well, how much pipe do you have? Oh, I didn't track that. Okay.
250 pounds. There you go. I'm giving you a number.
Max charge.
We're not supposed to go over 205, but who cares, right? It's like that. So the asking for a charge without piping lengths is no different than you calling your senior technician and telling them what the pressure is on the suction line and telling them to solve the problem, right? I have 115 PSI on my suction line. Can you tell me what's wrong with this piece of equipment? No, you can't tell what's wrong with the freaking equipment. Get out of here. There's no way I can tell you what the charge is without the actual piping lengths. I can guess, but it's an assumption. And it'll probably cost you a couple compressors.
And like, I don't like doing math, but I like doing math. It does the math for you, right? Like, if you want to be the guy that's doing it in the install manual and going through and calculating how many feet of pipe you have and adding multipliers and times this set of foot, like, sure, go for it. It's in the install manual. Or keep track of your pipe and it'll do it for you.
Well, where this comes in is the guy who makes excuses and says, well, I don't know how to build an express report. Well, guess what, buddy? Neither do I. Like, I've built 2 in my entire career, even when I worked for Daikin. And I'm not familiar with it. But guess what? I know how to look in the install manual and the sticker that everybody throws away that's still in the manual that's inside next to the compressor, inside the cabinet. It actually goes on the cover and you fill it out. It's this beautiful thing called a Sharpie. It's black. It smells great. And you Sharpie the numbers and the lengths on there to actually get your total charge. And so there are many ways to find out the total charge on a system. It isn't just the express report. So there isn't the excuse that I don't have it. It's more of, hey, you want me to start this piece of equipment? Where's the express report with the updated links? If you don't have it, did you measure the piping links? Okay, where are they? Do you have them? Can you give them to me? Okay, I'm going to do the math right now, and here it is. You don't have to wait on somebody. Yeah, it's right there. It's that sideways turn diagram right there. So yeah, they put it in a really nice, neat spot there to turn it sideways. But it's just one of those things where if you don't do that, you could be in for a world of hurt. I thought I didn't have to do it when I put my VRV life system on my house. And I found out that I was very wrong because it did not run right a couple of times. And actually, the charge that's in it right now is still very questionable. I'll be honest. But yeah, there it is.
I think the major lesson of this 25-minute ramble is just be responsible for your job, right? You're ultimately the person that's putting their name on it, saying it's complete. Just make sure you're working with whoever is supplying you the equipment to get the most accurate information back to them as possible, just so that everybody's on the same page. There's some sort of record of what was installed, how it was installed, how much pipe was installed.
Yep.
And if you want to do the math, it's there. If you don't, the program will do it for us.
For the love of God, document it for the next guy. Like, listen, I don't care if I have to buy a box of 1 million Sharpies and mail them individually to each one of you technicians listening to this. Just Sharpie it somewhere. Put the charge. Now, don't be the guy that writes the charge 1 million times and Sharpies it all, because I have trust issues and I'm going to go calculate it myself because I don't trust that you couldn't get it right the third time. This is more so of just saying, when you're doing these things, get a label maker, get a Sharpie, something, fill out the sticker, write it down on the sticker. Okay. If you're just putting it inside the panel as total charge is this, it's like, well, did you do the math? What does that actually look like? Because those things also matter too. Show your work, right? We learned that in math class and maybe elementary school, middle school. I don't know. I was homeschooled. So, there's that. But with that being said, it's just one of those things where success long-term is doing the difficult thing. And the difficult thing is measuring your pipe. I know tape measures are hard. They're sometimes expensive, but it's just one of those things that you can't skip. And you're going to get guys who say, I can charge it off Service Checker. And yeah, so can I. But guess what? Charging off Service Checker, it means that I'm charging it based upon what? The current conditions the building is in, right? And what is that? Well, if it's at construction, then there's no load. There's probably construction filters on the indoor units. Some of my dampers aren't open in front of some of the rooms, so there's restricted airflow. It's a cold day. It's a hot day. You take your pick. You're charging based upon the exact conditions that equipment is existing in right now. And I will be honest with you, doing that at construction startup, they're never going to be like that again. That building is not going to be either occupied like that. These units aren't going to be in the same conditions that they're in. And so again, it's still the wrong charge. It's the right charge for right there in that moment, but it is not the right charge for the way they're going to use that building in a year when they occupy all the rooms and they occupy the building and they get moving. So it's this thing where that's where it takes the guesswork out of. So can you charge it based upon Service Checker data? Yeah, of course you can. But it's a timestamp of right then and there. And so how many of you guys are going to go back 4 times in a year to adjust the charge? No one's going to do that, right? So just measure the lines and know that it's right the first time.
Yeah. I think that transitions into a good leeway for create yourself some sort of document that you can track your progress, track the job progress. Like in the automotive world, we had this thing called a route sheet, where it was, a car comes in, you call the customer back at certain intervals just to let them know that, like, your car's being worked on. This is what we found. 2 hours later, this is what we found. 2 hours later, it's done. Do something for your technicians, your startup technicians, saying, like, I want you to do a check-in on the job site to verify that, power is going okay, that the control wires are going okay. And then 2 months later, right, just think this is a year-long project. Every 3 months, send them out there just to get an idea of what's going on, right? Just keep track of all of the things that are going on. That way, when he's there for startup, he's not flying blind, right? He already knows where the equipment's at. He already knows who the electricians are. He already knows who the control guys are. Have some sort of document, like a pre-startup document, that can be compiled in with your actual startup sheets that says that this is what we did. day one, this is what we did day 365, and here we are, right? Everything works now because we kept track of it from cradle to grave, and we're happy to turn over a perfectly working system to you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna hit this one pretty hard because I get this excuse all the time, and it's an excuse. It's what it is. Let's call a spade here, guys. Okay, we're being honest with you. You can't use the excuse that Daikin came out to my job and they signed off on the piping. Right? They walked the job and they said, "Thumbs up, buddy. You did a great job." And they looked at 2 fan coils, right, and they maybe went up 1 flight of stairs. You know, just because someone from the manufacturer, whether it's the rep, whether it's the manufacturer themselves, comes out and looks at the job at that point in time, does not mean, unless they measured the piping for you, unless they measured with a caliper the size, diameter of the piping that you put in every single square inch of that building, they are not signing off on your installation. That is still your job to go through with a fine-tooth comb. I get so many people and customers and clients is the biggest one, because they go out and they say, Daikin was here 4 times and you're telling me they missed it? And it's like, I know, like, they missed it. No, they're not there to certify your project or your job, right? They're there to help answer any questions you have. They're there to walk around and look at the job, make sure that nothing sticks out as a red flag or any kind of issues like that. But it's your job as the contractor to measure these lines, to ensure they are accurate. You can't pass this buck onto the manufacturer, because I know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to take it like a football and they're going to kick it right back at you for a field goal. It's not going to happen, guys. Let's be honest. I love Daikin and the company that I worked for, but it's just one of those things where it's an excuse, right? You're trying to say that the manufacturer somehow gave you the allowance to break that piping rule. No, they didn't. It's in the installation manual. You still have to follow it, right?
Right.
Unless they wrote a letter with their name on it in a letterhead, which they will never do. It's never happened, right?
But
So
another good thing, and this is, I think, the thing that I probably dislike the most is after the fact going around getting models and serial numbers, right? Because you had to have models and serial numbers for your turnover, and like, why not do that before the equipment's installed, right?
So there's this beautiful thing called a bill of lading, and it's basically the invoice that you get for the equipment that you purchased. And on that is actually the model and serial numbers for every single piece of equipment you purchased. So if you're the person receiving the equipment to the job site, that piece of paper could actually save you a ton of hassle and headache. Now, it's not going to tell you where the units go and where in the building they are. You still have to go and find that and track it down and add it to the sheet. And some reps have done a really good job, Normanus, right, being one of them, MRG, Havtech, those people out there where they have some form of pre-startup checklist where they're already going through and they're mapping out where the units are, what their serials are, what the air nets and the group addresses and all that stuff like that. And then leaving that behind on the job site and also having a digital record of that is really important. So
yeah, definitely. So now that we've talked about enough of doing startup without actually looking at any equipment, I think
only 30 minutes later.
This is kind of where, how you do your job. I'm not here to tell you how to do startup on our equipment.
But we're going to tell you how to do startup on the equipment.
Yeah, well, unless it's my equipment. But where the roadmap leads, right? Once you know what's on the project, you should be able to develop kind of a roadmap of how you're going to attack startup, right? And talking with, if you're that large outfit that has different divisions, right? Talking with your installers and your pipe fitters and your ductwork guys is like, hey, what's your timeline for completion of some of the systems, one of the systems, something, so that I can, preemptively start doing my actual startup stuff. You got to go around and get your amperages off of motors, right? But these mostly are ECM. So do you have to do that? There's some fan coils you do, but most of them, you're not going to get a good amperage off of them. So, you can start checking that box off. But the kicker to that is when you can start doing pressure test and evacuations, right? So this is where I think people probably waste the most amount of time on, the electrician came through and bumped my branch selector, and now I got to finish X, Y, and Z, right? Well, if the pipe fitter turns it over and says it's done before the electrician starts landing wires, that's the day that you should be starting your pressure test. As a startup guy, as soon as that last joint is brazed shut, you should be starting your pressure test.
Yep. Don't leave it open. Yeah.
Right.
No, it's yeah.
that's just my opinion, right? I don't get to tell everybody how to do their job, but
I do.
that's to me is you want to verify that if there's any issues with this system, that as soon as that last braze joint is done, you're putting whatever 500 psi, 550, whatever it is, you're putting that pressure on that system and you're letting it sit so that you know that it is a sealed system at that point, right?
Yep.
And then we can start talking about where we do the vacuum and how that works. And I've seen a lot of chatter on the groups lately about how many hoses should we use? Can I use my S-mans? Can I what? this
Depends.
how,
You have 2 weeks to start this equipment up,
yeah,
or
how many pumps should we put in line, and all
yeah,
that fun stuff comes into play. I mean, and I think our previous guest Ty did a great video on vacuum and showing
vacuum
that,
hoses. Yes,
yeah,
love
hoses.
to HVAC. Yeah,
It's
so Ty
very,
Brenneman.
very important
Yep,
that
a ton of videos.
increase the surface area of hoses, right? Do yourself a favor, get the bigger hoses, right? If you're using True Blue or using the Appion, the big black hoses, whatever it is, right? Put it on your pump. It's going to save you so much time.
Well, so, and I did this comparison when I do the vacuum class with our internal Kalis guys, and that is you put a micron gauge on your pump and you put a micron, like directly on one of the ports for your 3/8 or 9/3 quarter-inch connection, do a 3/8 hose to the system, and then put one on the system itself. And you're going to find that the microns that you read at the system as opposed to at the pump, you're going to find that the vacuum pulls so much more than what you see on the other side of the hose. And that's because you're not using the pump to its full power or efficiency. And so again, more hoses, larger hoses, that allows you to get that full force that you need anyways from that vacuum pump, from that system, right? Because there is a pressure differential across that hose. And so more hoses, but we could go on for days about that. There's so many videos out there that we would not even explain it correctly. Love to HVAC, HVACschool.com, right? All those places have amazing videos. Jim Bergman, I mean, a vacuum guide, that showed on True Tech Tools. A great book, right? Even if you don't understand half of it, which I didn't, but there are great parts in there that's like, that's perfect. I didn't know that. So vacuuming, yes. Pressure testing, yes. Need some of that. How long do we pressure test for? Manufacturer says 24 hours at 550, unless you've got FXTQs, aluminum coils. They want you to stop at 450. Okay, good. Then we pull a vacuum. Okay, how low do we have to go? Well, we go down to 500 microns, and then we do a decay test. How long do we do a decay test? These are questions I get all the time. Decay tests, 10 to 15 minutes. You've got True Blue, the vacuum micron gauges, or Field Piece. They do an auto decay test where they do the math automatically for you in a matter of seconds to find out how much the rise is over time, to find out where you're going to be in 15 minutes. And it's going to say, hey, don't wait 15 minutes. I know where you're going to be in 15 minutes. It's a pass. Here you go. You're good to go. So there's tools that can speed that process up for that decay test. But these are steps you can't skip, right? Because skipping these steps means that when you charge the system and you test operation the system and you run the system and you walk away a week later and it's low on charge because you didn't pressure test it properly or pull a vacuum properly, to find the leak. That's what the vacuum's for. It's not just to dry it, but also to ensure there's no leaks. Dry and tight. Those are the words we use. To make sure that system is going to live a long and happy life, because you don't have to go back and do all that again. So, but you have any more to add to that before we get into the really good stuff, which is test operation?
I think the last thing I want to say about vacuum and pressure testing, we'll start with pressure testing and knowing that nitrogen may not actually be dry, but also knowing that nitrogen does fluctuate with ambient temperature. So if you pump this thing up to 550 and 50 degrees out, and then you come back the next day and it's 100 degrees out, right? You should expect to see a pressure change, and vice versa. It's 100 degrees out when you charge it with 550 psi, and then you drop it down, and the next day you come back, it's 50 degrees out. Well, yeah, it's going to have a pressure change, right? And like, I have the formula here I can share.
If only there was a website that had a calculator on it, or if there were tools that also had the same thing. HVAC School.
Yeah. So knowing that, right, like nitrogen gets that, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, people think nitrogen is a noble gas, right? Like
inert gas,
gas, right? Or it doesn't change pressures based on temperatures, right? But it's just not true. It does. Might not be a lot, but it does. So you could be searching for a leak because you put 550 in at 100 degrees and then came back and it's way less at 50 degrees, right? Yeah, you should expect a difference. But let's see. What's we start at 550. We're at atmosphere, so we're perfect sea level here. Perfect. We're going to say 100 degrees when we charged it.
Okay.
To come back to it, say 75. We'll come back in the morning.
Yeah, that's a 30 psi drop. 35 actually. And so I mean not 35. That adds up, right? So you look at this 524 psi. The temperature matters, right? And where do I find this? HVACschool.com/calculators, right? Up here in the resource section. All this stuff is here, guys, if you're not using it. Fieldpiece, their app, they have it. They have a nitrogen test portion of it that allows you to start it with their probe. Now, again, you leave the job site, you come back in 24 hours. Hopefully your phone still isn't there on connected, measuring that test. But you can at least take a snapshot beforehand so that when you come back, you can go to this website on your phone or the app and fill this out and do that calculation to find out where did it fall to, because that matters. And if we do this in reverse, right, let's say I filled it at 75 in the morning and I come back and it is 100 degrees outside, it's going to go up. Well, let's say that your pressure is 565, or let's say that your pressure is 555. And you have this temperature split. You're going to think there's not a leak when really it actually should be 576.
Right.
So, that's the tricky part, right? How much did my temperature change? And where am I measuring that? Is that every piece of the line? No, it's where the largest amount of your system exists. And usually just going off of ambient. So, but again, these are the things you have to be worried about when doing pressure testing. You have to understand what the temperature is at ambient that you left it at. And then where did you come back at it to? So.
Yep. Set yourself up for success.
Yep. So
enough about all that. Like, we're not here to tell you how to do pressure test evacuation. We're just giving you some tips. But geez, we're already 40 minutes in and we haven't even talked about startup yet. So test operation, right? What is it? What is test operation, right? So in the Daikin world, test operation does two things, right? It allows the system to be ran, but it also sets targets for the machine to know that this is how you should run with this charge in the machine, right? So going back to the beginning of the podcast is you got to know how much charge is in the machine. You got to have the right charge in the machine so that when you run test in the future, the machine goes, okay, well, I was supposed to have 36 pounds in there, and now I'm running and I'm happy. And then all of a sudden you get a leak and you got 20 pounds in there. It's going to think something's wrong, and it's going to let us know. So the test operation isn't just set it and forget it, right? It is kind of, you got to wait for it to be done, but it does other things for the machine that are happening behind the scenes there.
So, so what does that mean? That means that you need to charge the system fully before you put it in a test operation. It's this beautiful thing called setting mode 220, called additional charge mode on Daikin equipment, where you can actually add the additional charge you need to the system and get it to run before you do test operation. Because if you set it with the wrong charge, you got to do it again, right?
Right.
So,
don't use any of the system's test modes. I don't care what manufacturer. Don't use test mode to bring in additional charge. Don't charge it while it's in test mode, right?
Yep. I've done it. Not good. Doesn't end well.
No.
And so, go ahead.
No, go for it.
No, so this one I love so much because there are no manuals to say it. And I really think that's messed up because it screws with a lot of guys. I get a lot of phone calls about U4s, and naturally so. It's a beautiful error code. It's very perplexing and mysterious in itself. People put it in test operation. What is the error code you get on the outdoor unit on a Mirion and VRVX equipment when you put it into test operation and you have an error code inside, right? It's U4. So you're going to come back after running in test operation for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, and it comes back with a U4. Right. And you're going to go, oh, crap, I got communication problems. Let me go inside and check my communication wiring and all this other stuff. And there's this beautiful thing where no matter what the error code really is, and if it's not power related and it goes into test operation and it's not a refrigerant flow problem in a fan coil, and it's actually a fan coil with an error code, whether that's, a drain float switch tripped, an A0, someone set field settings incorrectly, something not on T1, T2, and it thinks there is, you're going to get a U4 at the outdoor unit. And you're going to get a different error code inside during test operation. So just be mindful when you put it in a test operation, you can't trust what it tells you. I wish you could, but you can't. You have to go and verify at the indoor units what is the actual error code. Because if they're both U4s, then it is a COM problem. But if you go inside and you see a U9 Go find the unit that has the actual problem. United is saying, hey, I don't have a problem with me, it's someone else. They're snitching on everybody else. And you have to go and find that indoor unit. And so it's just one of those things where you can chase your tail. If you're brand new to this, you're sweating through your shirt because you've never done this before. You put it in test operation, hoping, dear God, please don't explode, because that's usually what goes through people's minds. And then you get a U4, and then you go, oh crap, and you go straight to the manual and you start troubleshooting comms. Take a deep breath, go inside, and to see if the error code is actually U4, because you might find that someone just pulled a drain plug or someone didn't install the drain plug connection, on a wall mount out of the 56 wall mounts that you did for that system. It happens. And so don't just assume, go inside and verify that them error codes match, because that's a big part of it.
Let's say the most common one you're probably going to use an A0 on the inside, right?
Yeah.
Getting some kind of float issue, whether that's, the drain piping was too large and we flooded back into it, or the FXTQ, they took the jumper off and didn't actually land a float switch, and you're getting this U4 outdoor, but you're getting a different code indoor. That's going to take me into another topic of what I like to do before we even get into the test operation. I should have probably did that, but addressing, right? Addressing and field settings of indoor units. To me, that's my first step. I want to do everything on the indoor side, so that I know when I go to the outdoor unit, there's going to be no chance that I'm going to hit that A0. There's going to be no chance that I'm going to hit some kind of weird error code. T1, T2 has a fire smoke detector on it. I want to know all of the stuff about the indoor units before. So field setting and addressing is definitely the first thing that I'd like to do, right? Hook up service checker, even though it's not really required, and then take care of all the indoors. Do all the addressing. Once you get that error code, it's gonna help you figure out where that machine is.
That's good.
Field settings is something that is really project dependent, but there are some very basic ones that are kind of like the hitter, like they're going to be the same for no matter what. So I'll share kind of what my opinion on the best ones are for.
We do have
the systems.
Yeah, we do have a running tally of field settings that we all change at the same time, just because we know there's problems with other things. So
So these are the settings that I do typically on the BRCs that are just kind of the base level. This gets you by 85% of the time. Control from the BRC temperature if that's what they want. Get rid of this stupid filter flag because it's based on time. If you got a central controller, we want to make sure that we're sending the BRC temperature to the front end.
Yep, not the return.
The 1B13, make sure that the stat says off when it's in the off position. That's kind of a no-brainer. But disabling the clock because nobody ever keeps upsetting them, so we just get rid of it because it's annoying. And then temperature offsets, right? So in the past, a year and a half, 2 years, these mode 1C, 10, and 12 and 13 have become available for fan coils. It says this is for auto mode, which doesn't really work if you have an iTouch, so it's kind of irrelevant. But this used to be all that was there was mode C110. Now we have this 12 and 13 saying that we can do offsets on heating and cooling separately on that BRC. So if we need to, trick the person in the office that says it's always cold and they say it's in heat mode and it needs to set the thermostat, say 85, then we have that capability of setting these offsets. So this is probably the most important code for when you're using the BRC is make sure your offsets are set, make sure they're close, right? But it's not going to be the same as a temperature probe on the wall or somebody else's thermostat, but this will get you pretty close.
Well, so that's the thing. So we're saying that every BRC that you've ever installed is probably inaccurate on temperature reading. And we have found that to be true across the USA, across the world. The BRC controller is just off by 2.7 degrees. And so if you're installing BRC controllers and you've never set 1C-10 or 12 or 13, now that we have the newer BRC programming, if it's not there, then it doesn't apply to your model. Then your temperatures are probably off, right? They're probably reading warmer than they actually are. Now, you can always be the guy that goes out and measures every single temperature for every thermostat he ever does and set them correctly. And I've modified mine a few times, but I have found consistently they are actually off by 2.7 degrees. Yeah, and so setting them lower, it makes it for a more comfortable space, a more accurate temperature control. Because again, you can't just trust that the unit knows what it's doing. Offsetting BRCs, that's a common rule of thumb industry wide that you will not hear from the factory. And that's from experience in the field.
Yep. There's always going to be a little bit of temperature difference between what the. I mean, well, I'll get right into it. In the BRC, behind the temperature sensor, there's a capacitor. That capacitor gets a little warm sometimes, so
Yep.
we always offset it.
Yep.
That's the
And
gist
it
of it.
always helps fix the problem. It gets more runtime. It manages the temperature a little bit better. It keeps it a little bit cooler in the space than what you're maybe normally used to. And it gets that result of what people are looking for. And again, you have all these field settings that you can modify. Sorry if you have an FXDQ, there is a field setting to allow it to run at a higher static mode. It's not much faster than its normal mode, but you also have static pressure adjustments. And people ask me all the time, what are those static pressure adjustments? I changed it to 0.5 inches, but my ductwork's not at 0.5 inches. No, those are just selections to allow you to ramp the fan speed higher than its normal parameters would be to get more airflow for test and balance, right? To get the right amount of CFMs out of the vent per the design. And those are going to change based on equipment. And you can do the auto static adjustment, but I find that it sets it at the highest level anyways every single time. So you've got vents that are sweating or you got vents that are making noise. Obviously investigate your ductwork, but you do have other commissioning adjustments that are going to help you increase the capacity and change the capacity of that unit for fan speed adjustments. Now that's on all models. For the cassettes, there's the high ceiling height, and that allows you to actually increase the fan speeds on your cassette. So if you didn't know that, there is a field setting to increase fan speeds on cassettes. And that's that high ceiling setting. So
this is pretty much all the ducted units, up to the 5 ton.
Yep.
Would be 23.6. Now it varies the actual high level. So I'm more than willing to share the field settings charts, and this is a document that my internal group uses for any of the iTouches that we program that go out to the field, just so that all of these settings there's no guesswork, right?
Yep.
I recommend having something like this for anybody that's doing VRF startup, is like, know your settings before you go do startup, just so you could do that, right? So there's all the same settings that I talked about earlier. But aside from that, right, we're doing the addressing list too, right? Here's your fan coil tags. This is the model it should be. This is the condenser it should be tied to. Here's your addressing. If it had BACnet, here's the device ID. This document can help you in the long run just by organizing yourself. If you have this was a big project. This was close to 300 fan coils. So there's a lot to do to start up there. And then how many outdoor units do you have? This is the model numbers. Do you want to put the serial numbers in there? And again, I'm more than happy to share this with anybody that wants this, just to use it as a template. But knowing the settings before you're going to the job site to do them, you're leaps and bounds ahead of schedule there.
Yep. And again, after test operation is complete, after all your field settings have been changed, record service checker data. Always record service checker data. It should be 4 hours, should be 6 hours. Let your system record. You need that information after the fact, so that if something does happen, you have what it looked like when you left. And maybe you missed something. That's fine. But at least you have that information. At least you're not just turning the equipment on and said, yeah, it looked great. Do you have any information to compare it to from what it looked like brand new and what it looked like after the fact? That's also an important thing that I highly recommend if you're not doing it already. So
right. Even some of the manufacturers require it to get your extended warranties. So there's no reason you shouldn't be recording data through the whole process, and including after the fact. And we make it a point to do what we call functional testing after the fact of startup, is go zone by zone, checking to make sure that you don't have crosswire, you don't have cross pipes. This unit is responding correctly. Do we have an airflow issue? Is the ductwork open? Do we have construction paper on the ducts right? We want to make sure that there's no problems in turnover to say that, a year down the road, hey, you got a problem with that system, right? Like recently, some emails have come in for projects that I did start up on a long time ago, and they're saying like, we think there's a piping issue. Well, like there wasn't 6 years ago. Why is there a piping issue now? I don't think there's a piping issue. I think there's probably a charge issue, or there's an airflow issue. There's something else is going on. But just CYA is the best, right? Record everything so that you're covered.
Nope, and I agree. And so we're kind of coming close to your 54 minutes. So this stuff seems like basic information. We're telling you horror stories. because we can, but also so that you understand, learn from our mistakes, learn from others' mistakes. That's how we get better. That's how we push this forward. That's how we make the startup process easier. I've had jobs where we have flown through startup and it has been beautiful. And the guys who do it, they love the equipment. Right. And then I've seen the worst of the worst. And some of those have been my own doing, that it just drag you to the bone where you can't stand the technology anymore. And it has nothing to do with the technology. It has everything to do with the people who are installing it, setting it up, and servicing it. And so, take those steps. Yep.
I think if there was one thing that that I could recommend is just be prepared and plan before you take action.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, if there's nothing else, Roman, I think I would like to do a follow up at some point on actual startup procedures and running some machines and looking at some data. But
yeah, do some small videos. Yeah. Again, you're not alone. You're in this with all of us. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. You can always email us, message us. We're on all the socials and all the places. So don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what we're here for. There's no such thing as stupid questions. Again, we get from seasoned technicians to people who are just starting out in this trade. It is difficult, but it does get better. And following these steps and procedures, we're just trying to save you some time and some heartache, so that you can be successful in your market, and be the amazing technician we know you can be. So,
absolutely.
All right. See you guys on the next one.
Thank you.